Welcome everybody, it's Salman. In this video we are going to be looking at the new loading screen we got today, and this one's actually a pretty interesting one. And it's kind of a crossover of Revelations and Die Rise, and the only real connection it has to Revelations is the house, but this house doesn't look like it's inside Argartha, so I'm not too sure if it's a direct connection to Revelations, but we do have a very direct connection to Die Rise because of the two bottom images and the tears, and of course that little slap image on the side. But just to do a quick comparison between them, first the images on the side, we do see instead of a destroyed Earth like on Die Rise, we see a normal Earth, so this could be signified something I'll get into in just a second. Also, the bottom right image, we do see a teleporting arch right there. Of course, I'll explain that in a second. Of course, instead of going from somewhere in North America to somewhere in Asia, this one's going from somewhere in Ukraine to somewhere in UK. At least that's what it looks like to me. But then getting into the tears, look exactly the same. One looking like an outline of a person, and the other one just looking like a normal tear. And of course, that little image right there all the way to the side, I'll zoom up on it for you guys to know what I'm talking about. But this one is actually weird because this image was originally from Transit, but to see that for some reason they kind of darkened it up in the new one, it kind of makes me feel like it's saying that Transit may have never happened also, just because it looks like the Earth is normal here, so I guess Transit couldn't have happened either if the Earth was never destroyed, so that could be signifying that also. But two interesting things about these tears. So the first top left one is really weird because instead of having some random page before it, we actually have the original Nuketown loading screen, just like the Die Rise loading screen had it. It was the original Nuketown loading screen, and why it's the original one and not the remade one is so weird, especially after we look at something in just a second. But it's so weird to see for some reason this Nuketown loading screen is still canon with this comic book that we're looking through, because I thought we were rewriting this comic book, at least that's what it seemed like to me, but it looks like that's not exactly the case. Of course, what they could say is that, well, the original Nuketown loading screen was not affected, that still happened, but the new loading screen happens maybe sometime in the future of this comic book or something like that, or even maybe before. But it's really weird to see that, and I'm not too sure what to actually make of it right now. But looking at the right side of these tears, instead of having whatever we had before, we actually have one of the images we got before, and this one's actually really weird. So I'll have it on screen, and this is the one I believe we got in the last comic, and of course it's one with Richtofen shooting himself and all that good stuff. And this really doesn't make sense to me why this one would be the page after this one. This is going to be the next two pages you look after this one, and the reason why it makes no sense to me is because the Earth is fine before Richtofen ever went back in time to kill his Ultimis self in the next page. So why Richtofen kills Ultimis self if everything was already fine according to the order of this book, unless that's not exactly the case, or maybe he's trying to say something else. It's just weird to see that that page comes after this one. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. But anyways, going back into this image, and there's one last thing I want to point out before we actually look at the newer stuff to this image. I want to go back to the bottom right image, and this is really weird because, like I said, instead of going from somewhere in North America to somewhere in Asia, of course I was signifying going from Transit to Die Rise, instead we see somebody teleporting from, like I said, somewhere in Ukraine to somewhere in the UK. And this could be continued on the image above because this is actually the house, obviously, and why this might make even more sense because I believe somebody went in the code of Black Ops 3 and went and actually learned that the house is originally located in somewhere in the UK. That's at least why I heard it. That may not be actually true, but that could explain why they teleported to somewhere in the UK, and that would kind of explain it. But anyways, look at this again. It's kind of weird to see that these characters seemingly teleported together from the Ukraine to this place, but they're coming in from different directions. It's just weird. I don't know why that's a thing, but it's just something I decided to point out. And also there's ravens above it. People like to point that out, so I'll point it out too. I don't think it's important, but people are dead set that it's important. But anyways, going to the last image, and this image is just so cool, and there's a really cool theory going around about it, and I really like the theory too, and a lot of people don't, but I'm a really big fan of this theory because it's really cool. But anyways, before I jump ahead and start explaining the theory, let me first explain what's happening. So we do see these four characters, and these are probably the characters we see teleporting around and walking towards the house. And if you look all the way to the left, we see Primis Nikolai, then Primis Dempsey, but after that we see seemingly Ultimis Richtofen, and this is really weird. Of course, before I continue anymore, we do see Primis Takio. But anyways, going back to the Ultimis Richtofen, why is Ultimis Richtofen with the three Primis characters? That is just so weird. How the heck did this happen? There's a really cool theory going around about this, and I kind of thought about this too, but of course I believe somebody stated it first. But anyways, the theory goes that there was a point when the three Primis characters were separated from Primis Richtofen, and a point when Ultimis Richtofen was separated from the other three Ultimis characters. Now for the Primis characters, this was during the 2-year gap between the games, because if you guys remember, after Black Ops 2 Origins, and there was was a little thing between that, but I'm not really going to focus on that. But pretty much right after Origins, Richtofen separated from the other 3 Primis characters and went on his big old journey and all that good stuff, leaving the other 3 Primis characters alone. And this leaves a perfect gap for this to happen. But also, Ultimis Richtofen was also separated from the other 3 Ultimis characters. This is something we recently learned from Monty inside one of the radios in Zombies Chronicles. But during Ascension, the 3 Ultimis characters did not fight with Richtofen. Of course, in the map they did, but not at first. They were fighting with Gersh. But then, of course, Richtofen returned. But the main point is that Richtofen, even Monty says, was off doing his own thing, which is really weird that Richtofen separated from the 3 Ultimis characters, and of course they were fighting with Gersh, but he was separated himself. And this is really cool because it leaves an opening for both the 3 Primis characters and Ultimis Richtofen to separate and actually meet up. Now, how they did, I have no idea, but this would be so cool if this is actually true. And it would actually explain a lot, because if you remember back all the way to the Giant, the 3 Primis characters absolutely despised Richtofen, and there was really no reason to despise Richtofen at the time. If you remember, all they knew about Richtofen was what happened in Origins, and he really didn't do anything that bad they were aware of. But if they met up with Ultimis Richtofen or Evil Richtofen, there would be reason to be actually upset with Richtofen and despise him, because Ultimis Richtofen is obviously the evil Richtofen, but Primis Richtofen is the good Richtofen, obviously. But it would give an explanation for this. Now, there are people who complain about this theory and don't really like it for one reason, and I do not think it is a proper argument against this theory, but what they say is that it can't be Ultimis Richtofen, because during the Giant's intro cutscene, the 3 Primis characters meet Ultimis Richtofen while he's teleporting Maxis and Samantha away, and he obviously doesn't recognize them. Of course, he goes and says, "Do you know who I am?" A really bad accent right there. I do apologize for that. But anyways, he obviously doesn't recognize the other 3 Primis characters. But the thing is, Richtofen shouldn't know the 3 Primis characters at that time, because remember when Ultimis Richtofen met the other 3 characters? He met with them during Ascension, or right before Ascension. That was a long time after the events of Richtofen teleporting Maxis and Samantha away. That was a long time after that. I'm just saying, he shouldn't know the characters in the first place. The other 3 characters should know him, but he shouldn't know them. Now, why our characters went back even further in time to meet up Ultimis Richtofen, I have no idea, but it's just something really interesting. But of course, some of you guys think about that theory. Of course, that's a random theory thrown in here. Well, I guess it's not random, but I just want to throw that theory in here also. One last thing I want to leave this video on, and I do apologize for this video going on for quite a long time now, but there's just so much to talk about inside this thing. But anyways, the last thing I want to point out is that in this image, we do see our characters being teleported around through this purple thing, and how they are being teleported is a really big question, because how this happened inside Die Rise was because Richtofen was in control of the ether, and he was teleporting our characters around. But who's teleporting these guys around? How is this exactly happening? This just doesn't make that much sense. Is Monty helping them? But Monty really never mentioned it, and why would he be helping them go around this place? We just don't know. It could be Monty, it could be the Shadow Man, it could be, I don't know, almost anybody really that's ever had power over the ether or any power at all. We're just not sure, but that's another question I wanted to leave out there. But anyways, if you guys did enjoy this video, go ahead and thumbs up. If you guys want to stay tuned for content similar to this, go ahead and subscribe. But I'm going to go, and I will catch you guys on my next video.